Okay, so welcome to the first GoTo session this month. This will be the first of 4 sessions that we'll be holding. If you've read through some of the basic material, you'll know that there's a GoTo quiz worth 5% of your grade associated with each of these sessions. So if you don't attend it live, you sort of have to watch it anyway after the fact. But these sessions are recorded for later viewing in case you're not able to attend. And the quiz questions will appear sporadically throughout the presentation, so I'll try to linger on those questions when they do appear. But basically, it's those questions that you'll use to then go and take the quiz online. When you open up the quiz activity, you'll just see blank boxes, essentially. That's where you just need to fill in the answers to the questions that appear throughout the session and to answer them with some care. But basically, this is going to be a combination of a welcome, an overview, and I do want to get into the larger picture of what we're going to be working on this month and how we sort of have to hit the ground running in terms of topic selection and in terms of completing your first assignment, which is a discussion board participation, but does require some sort of drafting or composing on your part. So I want to get into what that will entail. But first, let's just back up. Here's what I'll try to cover for today. We'll go over the course in general a little bit. I'll talk about the assignments that are immediately coming up. I'll explain a bit about public service announcements because this is what we're working on all month. So maybe you're familiar with that term, maybe you're not. Then I want to get into issues of audience and topic selection. And I really should have another bullet point here because I want to talk about what you'll need to do for the very first discussion. And then finally, we'll leave it open to some questions at the end if people are confused about anything. Okay, so I know there have been some textbook issues. I've already gotten some people emailing me about confusion. I think most people's problems have been in relation to not clicking on the link itself in the PDF registration document and instead trying to copy and paste it in. And when you copy and paste it in, the link often is broken. So you really need to click on the link directly. I've checked pretty recently, and it seems like a whole bunch of people have registered successfully. So that's a good sign. So are there any people here who have not been able to register? I'm just curious. I can't really get too much in depth in this session about those issues, but I do kind of want to get a sense of how people are doing. You can use the chat box to respond. Registered but no ebook. I'm not sure what that means, because by register I mean actually going to the McGraw-Hill site, which I have up here on the screen now. Do you mean you started the registration process but had to stop when it got to the ebook code? Perhaps. You should have gotten the ebook code sent to you via email, so make sure you check your inbox, your junk mail folders. If you truly didn't receive a code, you'll need to contact FSO support, and they should get you that code pretty quickly if there truly was a problem. But it's something that you should have received already. But once you do successfully register, then you can enter the section. So for example, here's our course. This is the instructor's view, but it's pretty much identical to what you see on your side. There are weekly readings, okay, and they're pretty easily organized. Week 1, week 2, week 3, so on. And I wouldn't skip the readings, because if you've started them, and other people can confirm this, they're all like tremendously short. Like here's one of the readings, right? It's just this. Some are maybe a tiny bit longer, but they're all quick. So don't get too relaxed and just blow it off. Because the readings really are quick. But I wouldn't say the more important stuff, but the stuff that's actually being graded are these Learn Smart Achieve programs. These are interactive activities that when you click on them, for example, if I click on the week 1 activity, by the way, these are organized by weeks as well, and they have specific due dates. So one of these interactivities needs to be completed by, looks like September 8th, and so on. There's one that's all month long. Because it's the longest of the bunch, it really takes a couple of hours of dedicated work every week. So this is ongoing, so you have the entire month to complete this one. But there are also smaller modules that are due each week. Zachary, the weekly reading doesn't open for you. I'm not sure why that would be. Sometimes I get the dates wrong, but I think I've set all the dates basically to be open the entire month, meaning they should have opened September 1st and they end on September 28th. I'm going through them now. I don't know why you would get into anything past week 1 or week 2, but you might want to try it with a different browser. I don't know. I have no idea. The readings should. Yeah, if the Learn Smart Achieve stuff is working, I have no idea why the readings wouldn't be opening. That's very very odd. I would try maybe a different browser. But if you click on one of the Learn Smart modules, it like takes you through the process. I can only do it in preview mode because I'm an instructor. But basically, it will set up. It will walk you through the steps. Okay, it will. As soon as this finishes loading, it will like set up a schedule, like how often you want to work for how many hours, and so on. Actually, Jeremy asked a good question. Do we have to take the quizzes associated with the readings? No. Like lots of times those short readings will end with questions or short activities. No, you don't have to do those. You just have to read the material. Good question. So anyway, I won't walk you through this, but just know that there are these weekly interactive modules you have to complete, and there's one month-long module, and as long as you click on the activity, it will take you through the steps. And if we look at the grade breakdown, you'll see that the week 1 Learn Smart modules were 3%. In week 2, it's 4%. Week 3, it's back down to 3%. So there's 10% of your grade right there. And the month-long activity is worth 5%. So that's 15% that's connected to. Let me see if I can go back. That's 15% of your overall grade that's associated with this stuff. And on the one hand, by the way, I swear I'm not shilling for McGraw-Hill, but I really have heard from students who have found these things valuable. They can be frustrating at times because they take a little bit of time to complete. If you're not answering questions correctly, you'll keep getting asked more questions, sometimes the same questions you've already seen. So I do understand that the software can be a little bit awkward at points, but I really have heard, for the most part, good feedback from the students. And it's the easiest 15% you can earn because it's just graded on completion. Okay, so you complete these activities, these modules to 100%, and you get all those points. So it's 15% that's really just practically handed to you. The GoTo training quizzes, I think, are incredibly easy too. You either attend the sessions or watch the recording and take the quiz. There's another 20% of your grade that's pretty much given to you. And as long as you hand in your work on time, as long as you remain professional, the 10% professionalism grade should also be in your lap. So when you add it all up, there's really about 45% of this class that are gimme points, which is why it's super frustrating when some students fall off or don't keep up with the work. I understand things happen. I understand people have busy schedules, and I try to be as helpful as I can. But just keep that in mind, okay? Nearly half this course is handed to you if you'll just take it and run with it. I really don't like to see students struggle or not pass. Drives me crazy. Okay, where was I? I got on my soapbox for a while there. Okay, so get signed up with McGraw-Hill Connect as soon as possible. Okay, because one of the activities is due September 8th, which I think is Monday. Okay. By the way, I've completely. I'm sorry for going back and forth, but let me go back to this page real quickly again. I've altered a lot of the due dates for stuff because technically we instructors had both Monday and Tuesday off. So kind of from our perspective, we're starting today for real. I know a lot of you were already online on Monday, Labor Day, asking questions, and I think I was pretty quick at responding to those. But because we've gotten a late start, like I feel weird asking you to have something due immediately this Sunday before we've even talked or discussed it. So I have adjusted some of the due dates. Some stuff would typically be due earlier than it really is, but I've shifted things around. But I already have gotten some messages about how the assignment sheet itself is still reflecting the older date. So please pay attention to the due dates that are actually on your activity page. I'm going to try to clean up those documents and correct the dates that are within them. But it's the dates that are actually on the FSO platform that are correct, okay? So keep that in mind. I know there's been some confusion. And I know there's been some confusion about I teach two different versions of this class, one that's in the classroom here in Orlando and one that's entirely online. And I realized that some information got cross-pollinated by accident, just because as much as I try to make sure that every single reference to the classroom is eliminated, some of it sneaks in. So I do appreciate the people who have contacted me about those things. Hopefully I've eliminated just about all of it now. Okay, so let's talk about this week's assignments. And actually, I'm going to put the discussion board assignment on hold for a second. I'd actually like to talk about the larger assignment we're working on all month, which is public service announcements. When I say public service announcement, like, what does that mean to you? What do you think of? Or can you give me an example? Like, what does a public service announcement do? Or what's an example of one that you've seen on television or in magazines? Because I think we need to understand what PSAs are, or else we're going to struggle throughout the month. Can anybody think of examples? You can either type in the chat box, or there's a little hand icon. If you're brave enough to raise your hand and want to speak out loud, I can unmute you. But what does that mean, public service announcement? We got lots of people in the room. Okay, Daryl says inform the public on a specific topic, whether it's positive or negative. Okay, that's good. I like that working definition. There's an important thing there, right? We're informing the public about an issue. Okay, an important issue. Jeremy kind of says something similar, communicating something to the community. I probably am pronouncing this name terribly. Hyro. I would consider an example of PSA as Amber Alert or Storm. Yeah, that's similar, although, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I guess they are public service announcements, but they're more news updates, or I don't know. They're in a weird sort of category that I with. It's difficult to describe. It's a little bit different than a public service announcement, although I do think it's very, very similar. Broadcasting information to change behavior. I'm not sure. I'd like to hear examples of that. Okay, here are great examples of PSAs. Have you seen those incredibly sad commercials with Sarah McLachlan with the dogs? They typically tend to be on for some reason like at 10 o'clock at night when you're going through the television channels, and you see like this 2-minute thing on dogs that are malnourished or chained up or locked up. Like, that's a public service announcement. Or at its very simplest, a billboard that, for example, speaks out against domestic violence and what you can do about it. That's a public service announcement. Or a very, very specific message about, or it could be even something about, like, helping to prevent forest fires, or calling on people not to smoke. Or cyberbullying. Okay, that's a great example, Daryl. Yeah, like an important issue that you need to like deliver to the public. Yeah, Thomas makes an important point here. A public service announcement has no commercial content. Right. There's no desire to create profit. You're not selling something. You're just trying to educate the public about a very, very specific, important issue. This is what you're going to be doing in this class, but there's a twist. You're not going to be doing public service announcements on cyberbullying or smoking or trying to prevent forest fires or animal cruelty. You're not going to be doing PSAs on that. You're going to be creating PSAs that are very, very specific to your field of study. Okay, so that's rule number one. The PSAs for this class have to be industry related. So what are you guys studying here? Go ahead and type in the chat room. Are you here for recording arts, game design, mobile app development? Okay, so we have show production, game design, internet marketing. Okay, great. Yeah, the common ones tend to be game, music, usually film too. But okay, we got a pretty good spread here. So you're gonna inform the public about something specific within your industry. Okay, so it has to be industry related. It needs to be narrow in scope, and we're going to talk more about that in a second. Okay, so it has to be fairly specific, not super broad. And I'll give examples of broad versus narrow. It needs to have a clear persuasive angle, because the public service announcements for this class need to have a call for action. meaning you really want to not just educate readers or viewers about something, but you actually want them to do something about it. Okay, it's not necessarily that you have to solve the problem on your own or come up with some grand solution, but in some small way, you're calling on a specific audience to do something, which is the last point here, right? A call for action or support. Here's kind of an overview of what we're doing the entire month. So this week we're mostly focusing on pitching a topic, also writing the introduction of what will become your essay, and I'll get some more about the introduction later in the session. But a big part of it will be you'll have to find your topic, because some of you already know issues in your industry pretty well, but some of you don't. Some of you are probably thinking, well, gosh, I don't know anything about, I'm here to study recording arts. I have no idea what an industry-related issue is. That's why you start moving now. Like, I recommend hitting the internet. If you know people working in the industry, reach out to them. Even a simple Google search for like issues or controversies or debatable issues in your field, like anything that leads you toward, because I'm pretty open in terms of approving a variety of topics, but they have to be specific and they have to be industry related. I would love to give some examples. The problem is when I give an example, from example, game design or music production, then people are just tempted to run with whatever I throw out there. So I try to pull back from it. But I have, and actually, I apologize for going back and forth, but let me go back to our class discussion page. Later in the session, I'm going to explain how your first graded activity is to post to the discussion board your topic, why you chose it, who your audience is, and to draft an opening paragraph for what your eventual essay, which is due in week 2, will be. And I wanted to give an example because I've already posted to the board to give an example of what you need to do. And for some reason, this is all... Oh, there it is. For some reason, all these activities were looking like gibberish to me. Yeah, well, I mean, Thomas, that's probably something I need to fix. I think 250 words I look at for me, and maybe, again, I need to fix the wording, is for the entire post, okay? The introduction itself, maybe 250 words, it may not, but there are 4 things you need to address for this first assignment. You know what? Now that we're talking about the assignment, I know I'm getting things out of order, badly out of order, but now that I'm here, I guess maybe I should talk about it. So let me bring up the assignment sheet for this. Let me go into our class. Bear with me. Got multiple tabs open, got multiple things going on. Okay, online discussion, exploring your appeal. Okay, good. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Okay, so as I said, ignore... I got to go back in here and fix this. In general, every month things are due on the exact same day. It's just that things have gotten out of order because we've gotten a late start this month, so I've actually shifted the due date for this assignment. I think it's the 13th. Someone want to quickly verify for that for me? I think it's... Or maybe... No, 13th. That sounds too late. What day do I have this assignment due? I changed so many dates on all these assignments that I forget. September 10th. Okay, so a Wednesday. So normally this would be due on a Sunday, but it's now due on a Wednesday, okay? Again, this was designed so you don't go into panic mode thinking, oh my gosh, today's already Wednesday and in a couple days I have to produce this thing, okay? So you have a little bit of space to find out what your topic is, to pitch your topic to me. I'll give you feedback on your topic, and you can hit the ground running before you have to complete this assignment. Okay, but here's the assignment sheet. So 250 word minimum for the post. So we're talking about the entire post for whoever asked that question, Jairo. And basically you can read through this on your own, but you have to do 4 things. First is to post a draft of your opening paragraph. Okay, what could function as the introduction paragraph for your essay? I know it seems like we're approaching the essay pretty quickly because you'll create a draft of your essay in week 2, but this is a fast-moving class because we only have a month. So one of your first assignments is to write an introduction paragraph, and then you go through other things. So after you create your paragraph, you'll explain 2 reasons why you chose your topic, what you think your audience can do about the issue, and what questions you have for your classmates. So I've modeled this, okay? So already on the discussion board, I've posted an example where I've written an opening paragraph where I've pretended that I'm a game design student. Okay, I'm not a game design student. I'm an English instructor, but I decided to pick something. And I've written an introduction paragraph. It ends with a clear thesis. We'll get into these issues too in just a moment, and I've underlined the thesis where I have a specific audience that I've identified that I'm trying to reach, where there's a specific call to action, etc. And then I answer the other things. I explain why I chose this topic. I explain who I think my ideal audience is, and then I ask questions for my fellow classmates. Actually, we're going to come back to this because I think a lot of what's here won't make sense unless I get back to my PowerPoint presentation and explain some core concepts about audience, about thesis, about what introductions do, so I don't want to get too out of order here. But just to finish up, okay, so week 1 we're pitching a topic and writing an introduction. Week 2 we're narrowing that topic down and we're writing the draft of our essay, which includes some research. During week 3 you're going to do some peer review online where you'll read each other's essays, well, at least 2 other students' essays, and respond. In week 4 you're actually going to get away from essay writing and you're going to take your topic and your call to action and turn it into a multimedia public service announcement. Okay? We'll get more into that next week, but basically in week 4, you'll create a short comic or a short film or a short audio podcast or a short song or jingle. So your PSA will take a different form, because PSAs in the real world don't exist as essays, right? They have some sort of visual element. They're a commercial or a film, or you could be driving in your car listening to NPR, National Public Radio, and you'll hear a PSA. Okay, so you'll be creating what's closer to a real-world PSA in week 4. But before we get to that, we'll kind of follow the more traditional essay writing thing. Okay, I've actually taken longer with this first bit than I wanted, so I'm going to speed up. Let's talk about issues of audience. This is pretty important, this thing here. Oops. Because this may have to do with a quiz question that will be coming up soon. But this is called the rhetorical situation. It's often framed as a triangle. If you look at the triangle, at each angle there's the writer, the text, and the reader. For the quiz question, yeah, you should know what the rhetorical situation is. When this class is over, I don't really care if you remember that term. What I want you to understand is that everything we produced, whether it's a true written text like words on a page, or even if it's a film or a comic or a song, those are text too, even if they don't have words on the written page. Text means more than just written documents, but there's always some sort of writer or author or singer or artist. There's always some sort of reader or viewer or listener, and then there's the thing itself, right? The thing that's being composed. And all I want you to understand is that there's a relationship between all three. You change any of the circumstances dealing with any of these terms, and it affects the other two, right? So think about, for example, you'll write a draft of an essay for week 2. Who you're trying to reach as an audience will affect things. So, for example, if you're a game design student, if you picture your audience as being fellow game designers, then obviously your language could be much more technical, which would affect the outcome of the text. And it would also affect the choices you make as a writer in terms of what you stress, what kind of languages you use, and of course it would affect the reader as well, because a highly technically proficient reader would understand what you're saying. However, if you were a game design student, writing about a PSA topic meant for a general audience, maybe just game players, again, your reader would be affected, your text would be affected. So again, it's this interaction between the 3 points of writer, reader, and text. You start making alterations to any one of these things, and it affects the other two. Okay? So, quiz question number 1. Let me move this out of the way. What is a rhetorical situation? Okay, I just went over it. So you essentially, I mean, you don't need to write mini essays when you take the quiz, but you should say more than just 2 words. Don't just say triangle, writer, text, reader. I mean, spend a couple sentences explaining things so I get the idea that you understand the gist. But there's quiz question number one. If you know how to take a screenshot, you could take a screenshot of this slide. If you would just want to jot down the question using pen and paper, do so. But I'm just going to linger a few seconds longer before I move forward. But there's quiz question number one. Okay, and we're moving. We're moving onward. In 3, 2, 1. Okay. It's also important to think about audience. I kind of just got into this with the rhetorical situation, but different audiences have different needs, and that might sound like nice in theory. You might think, oh, what's the big deal? Yeah, blah, 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 audience is important. But no, I really want you to think about audience for this assignment, because if you don't have a specific audience in mind, your PSA can kind of get off track. I just gave an example of that, like with the game design student. Like, there's a huge difference between whether you're writing to fellow game designers or whether you're just speaking to game players. So whatever your topic is, you'll need to think about audience, which leads us into different types of emotional appeals. There are 3 broad types of appeals. They have fancy Greek names. And here's the first one, which is called pathos, which is the appeal to emotion, right? So the Sarah McLachlan super sad dogs being mistreated commercials that you see on television, like that has pathos working overtime, right? Like it's trying to hit you in your gut. It's trying to make your heart beat. It's trying to make you really, really feel for what you're seeing so that you'll donate money or donate time or whatever it's asking you to do, right? So there's the appeal to emotion. You all know emotion is a really, really powerful tool. Like, it can speak volumes. So there's one. And by the way, I don't care if you remember these fancy terms like pathos, although, to give you a hint, maybe one of the quiz questions might deal with these terms. But when the class is over, I don't care if you remember. The important thing here is to remember that one way to get through to readers is with emotion. So what's the opposite of emotion? Or who can show off? Because there's always somebody who's learned these terms in the past, like in high school. Does anybody know what the opposite of pathos is? And if you don't know the specific term, what's the opposite of emotion? We can speak to people through the heart, or... Okay, good. Thomas says logos. Well, Daryl, good. You've named the other one, ethos, which is... I wouldn't say it's the mirror opposite. It's kind of a semi-opposite. So yeah, that's probably the right question. The true opposite, I think, though, is logos. Because if we're not appealing to people through the heart, we're appealing to them through the brain. Okay, so logos is the appeal to logic. This means, for example, using facts, statistics, things that people can't refute. Back to the Sarah McLachlan example of the sad dogs on television. That one exists purely pretty much through ethos, but it could use logos. Like, it could hit you with stunning facts that just knock you over because you didn't realize that things were so bad. So logos is where our secret sort of Mr. Spock from Star Trek comes in, right? We're going to use like hard, solid logic to appeal to people. And the final one, as some people mentioned, is ethos, which is the appeal to authority, and it kind of is related to logos. It's somewhat opposite of the appeal to emotion. But authority here, even though I have the picture of a police officer, I don't really mean so much authority in that sense. I just mean authority in terms of like trust. So if, for example, someone's doing a public service announcement about forest fires, like, who are you going to trust more as a spokesperson? Like a forest ranger who's worked for 20 years and appears on camera speaking, or Kim Kardashian, right? Like, who is just going to naturally appeal to you in terms of a sense of trust? Probably one more than the other. Let's see. Jesse asked a good question. Doesn't everything appeal to emotion? Yeah, I think you could make that argument. And I think even when you're using like hardcore facts, logos, or even when you're appealing to someone's notion of authority or trust, I guess there always is, I guess, a connection there to one's sensibilities. Yeah, we can't turn off emotion completely. We're not robots. But yeah, Thomas makes a good point here too, which is authority is more abstract, like what ought to be done. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, and that classic logic is very formal. But you are right in the sense that we're talking about appeals, okay? And appeals are trying to reach people and move them and convince them. And sure, I guess that on some level it's always dealing with emotion in some ways. It's just that for convenience's sake, we divide these up into three different categories, like pure emotion, and then things that are more distanced and reasoned, if that makes sense. Okay, so quiz question number two. I should have worded this different. I don't like the way this is worded, but okay. How are the three means of persuasion intended to appeal to a specific audience? Basically, what are the three means of persuasion? Okay. What are the three things that we just went over? So take a screenshot, jot it down. These questions aren't terribly long, so you could probably jot them down quickly. And again, you don't have to write a mini essay in your quiz answers. You just have to spend a couple sentences defining what each method is and what it specifically does to appeal to an audience, okay? If you really want to show off, give a real world example or a made up example that could exist in the real world. But just make it clear to me that you understand what those three methods of appeal are and how they can reach a specific audience. Okay, and we're moving. We're moving. As I mentioned before, you need to start brainstorming PSA topics now. Okay, so if you don't know about issues related to your industry, get cracking. Get on the computer. If you live in a big area and know people who work in your industry, explain to them what you're working in class and get some sort of sense of what's out there. There are lots of topics, and if you're really struggling, I'm not saying that I won't help you out, but I do want you to start at least, because often what will happen is you'll come to me with a pretty broad idea, but then we can work on it together to narrow it down, and that's helpful because at least we're working on something that interests you instead of you just running with something that I give you off the bat. That's not terribly useful or helpful. So I want you to start brainstorming PSA. I know you're new to Full Sail. I know that some of you have industry experience, some of you don't. But this is part of what this class is about. You're going to learn about your industry if you didn't know already. So start researching what are sort of controversial issues or important issues that you can sort of take a stand on within your industry. Maybe forbidden is too strong of a term, but these are topics that I try to steer people away from. Piracy, whether it's related to music or film, specifically the topic is usually piracy is bad. I think we know that. Like, I think that PSA doesn't need to exist because most people understand that piracy is bad. Even yeah, Chelsea's got a sad face. Chelsea, you should speak to me. I'll encourage you to brainstorm other options and get to me. If you're passionate about the piracy thing, speak to me. I can usually find twists on it or ways to go about it that are more interesting than just saying piracy's wrong, piracy's bad. But I do try to steer people away from it because it seems like an easy. I hate to be the mean instructor, but I don't know. It seems like it's an easy topic. Like, there's so many interesting things related to the music industry that it seems like choosing piracy. Thomas says it's a great topic. And same thing with film, right? Because piracy relates to film, piracy relates to games. Like, there are so many fascinating topics that I wish people would explore because they'll learn so much more. And it's just, I don't know. Maybe I'm the mean instructor, but it seems like piracy is sort of an easy way out. That said, I would encourage you, first of all, try to brainstorm other topics. Maybe there's something you're more interested in. If you're truly passionate about this topic, speak to me about it, because I do have ways that you can maybe kind of deal with that topic, but approach it from a much different angle. Jesse says, is it considered piracy if you copy music from a disc that you bought and then put it on your phone or iPhone? I don't know. I don't think so. I think if you own the CD, there's... like, you already... I don't know. Somebody else can answer that. Other topics that don't work so great, like censorship is bad. Again, Hollywood is unoriginal. You can see the point here. The problem is the piracy one. I think is just sort of a little bit obvious, like people know about it. These next two are examples of what I talked about earlier, where they're just way too broad. Like censorship is bad. It's like, okay, like I'm already visualizing the essay and the eventual public service announcement, and it's just that becomes kind of so loose that it can become messy. Jeremy, what is censorship? You know what censorship is. Censorship could mean anything from censoring music, right? Trying to eliminate foul language, or putting stickers on something. It could refer to games. You know, it's not true censorship, but the labeling of games based on age appropriateness, some people view as censorship. Hollywood is unoriginal. I get this one a lot, and that's why I'll try to steer people from this as well, especially the film students. Again, it's just way too broad, and it's also kind of not true. Like, I understand the complaint that Hollywood is unoriginal, but and you would think so sometimes when you see the movie after movie that's just the same kind of movie with CGI. But on the other hand, there's a lot of interesting things going on in television and film. It seems like with Netflix and original programming and niche programming, we have, like, in some ways more original and creative and interesting things going on. But anyway, the point here isn't to get into these specific topics, but just to say that the problem with these are that they're kind of too broad. Also, topics, again, if you remember my requirements for the class, they have to be industry specific, but they also have to be narrow and persuasive. So just using common sense, like, why would I say that these topics aren't great? Like, we do have graphic design as a field of study here at Full Sail. So graphic design is important and is all around us. Or films are making such great technological advances. Or music artists should be allowed to be their own individuals. Or show production is an important part of the entertainment industry. Just using common sense, like, why would I be encouraging you to go back to the drawing board or to think through these things a bit more? Why would I say these aren't the greatest public service announcement topics? Any thoughts? Again, just use common sense. Like, don't overthink it. Don't worry too much about the right answer or the wrong answer. Like, why would I be the mean instructor and say that you still need to find your topics here? Any thoughts? Jesse says because it's one-sided. Okay, maybe. Although, I'll hold off. Okay, Jeremy says too broad. Yeah, that's a big one. They are too broad. Okay, good. Jeremy and Thomas's go together. They're too broad, and Thomas's, I think, is really key here. Like, there's nothing you're asking people to do, right? It's like purely informational. And although public service announcements do inform the public, so there is information involved, it's more than just like encyclopedic information. It's about an important issue that you want to persuade a specific viewer or reader to do something. So graphic design is important and is all around us. Okay, I agree. And like, I don't mean to laugh. I'm not making fun of people, because actually I think it's completely natural to come up with these topics, and that's why I want you to come up with these topics, even if they're broad to begin with, because I'll help you narrow things down. So I'm not laughing at anybody in particular. It's just that I see these sorts of statements appear all the time. So yeah, graphic design is important. Okay, I agree. But what do you want a specific reader or viewer to do? Same thing with films are making technological advances. Okay, I agree. But that's why I got a little bit confused when Jesse said it's one-sided. Because my feeling is there's actually no side. There's no stance you can take. There's no position you can take. Right? And that applies to all of these. So, yeah, and they are too broad, as Jeremy pointed out. Okay, Chelsea asked a good question. Can the PSA be directed toward industry professionals, or does it have to be the general public? Well, this is why I spent so much time talking about audience, because you'll need to decide. And maybe I should go back to my... Well, no, actually, I'll still hold off going back to it. We'll get back to my model introduction that I posted to the discussion board. But the simple answer is, Chelsea, you'll need to decide. Like, probably it shouldn't be addressed to the general public. Chelsea, what's your area again? Are you in music? So, like industry professionals, that's one specific group. But like, let's say you're dealing with, I don't know, punk music or country music or hip hop music. Like, even at the very least, it wouldn't really be the general public. It might be age specific, or it might be genre specific, right? You're trying to reach people who listen to this type of music, or something like that. But you'll basically have to decide. Okay, so here's quiz question number 3, which isn't really much of a question. It's just spurring you to get moving. You're going to propose a topic, okay? So in your quiz, you're going to explain to me what your topic is. And again, you should do more than just say piracy. Like, you should you should spend a few sentences defining what it is you'd like to explore. And you know, you mostly get points for just answering the question, although if it's completely off and I sense like, wow, I talked about this during the session. Why would anybody fill in their quiz sheet with graphic design is important and all around us, right? If I see something like that, I might take off a few points because it's repeating the sort of issues I mentioned in the session. But mostly I don't really take off many points because I understand that your topics may not be perfect, but I want to see them before we get too deep into this course. Because I just intuitively know from teaching this course often which topics sort of lead toward success and which ones create problems. So this quiz question is really designed to help you. Daryl says, for show production, could I choose lighting designer for my topic? Lighting designer, you mean like the person who is lighting? I mean, sure, that would work as a topic, but topic here means it's more than just stating like lighting designer. Like, you have to explain to me on some level like what your topic is and what your appeal to action is. Like, I'll give an example in just a second when we look at my discussion board post. But it's really you presenting your topic in a fuller sense, like what it is, like what your topic is, what your stance is on that topic, okay, and what you hope to get through to people. And I'll give an example in just a second where I'll show my video game example, how it has a very, very specific audience identified, how it has a very particular stance that it takes, and the topic is it's persuasive. It's not just informational. If you just put lighting designer down in your quiz, I don't know what that means. Okay, so let's talk about the week 1 assignment, which is to choose a topic, find your thesis, and draft an introduction paragraph. So let's go back to my... Well, actually, let me stick here for a second. Let me talk about introductions. I know this is like a super packed first session, and there's a lot to keep handle on, and I apologize for that, but we really have a lot to get through, especially since we started late. So let's talk about thesis and introduction. Thesis is a term you've probably heard before in high school. Okay, a thesis acts like a roadmap to your paper. It typically appears at the end of the introduction, and in my modeled example on the discussion board, that's where it appears at the very end. But basically, it's just a sentence or two that defines your paper and tell readers where your paper is heading. For this class, it's even simpler because you don't really even need to come up with a subtle thesis or a thesis that takes a particular subtle angle. No. Your thesis for this class is going to pretty much state things pretty clearly. What your topic is, who you're trying to reach, and what specifically you want readers to do. So here's an example of a thesis. The video game companies have made strides in presenting strong, non-sexualized images of women. These companies need to be pressured to do more. Okay, so already we know that we know what the topic is, okay? It has to do with images of women in video games. And we're already getting toward what the gist is. These companies need to be pressured to do more. Gamers, here's a specific audience, need to write to game publishers or gaming magazines and let their voices be heard. Okay, so here's 2 sentences. But the gist is, in these 2 sentences, we know absolutely what's going to be covered. We know that the main topic has to do with representation of women in video games and how it's not good and how it needs to change. There's a specific audience invoked, okay? Gamers, not just general people or the people who design the games necessarily, but the people who play the games. and there's a specific call to action. In this case, that they need to make their voices heard. Okay, so there's an example of a thesis. That's important because you'll need your thesis to end your introduction. So we might as well talk a little bit about introductions. Introductions kind of do three key things, I think. They briefly define the issue at hand. Okay, I underline briefly because more development takes place in the body of the paper, but introductions are just the space to sort of introduce the topic. That's why they're called introductions. Sometimes I see students who go completely overboard in the introduction. It's almost as if they're so excited that they start writing the bulk of the paper right then and there. No. Introductions are much more modest than that. As I just mentioned, introductions typically end with a clear thesis. And ideally, they should find an engaging way to grab the reader's attention. By the way, from high school, do you remember any of those tricks? Like sometimes teachers present them as tricks or techniques to grab the reader's attention right from the get-go. Do you remember any of those techniques? Like if we want to interest the reader pretty much from the first sentence, we can do different things. No? Or people don't get this in high school anymore? Okay, Daryl mentions a good one. Begin with a rhetorical question. Yep, that's one of the techniques. Here's some more. I call them hooks. That you can begin with an example or anecdote. It can be like an actual example, one you read about in the news or researched, or it can be a personal anecdote from your real life. As Daryl mentioned, you can begin with a thoughtful or rhetorical question. You can begin with a powerful quotation. You can begin with what I call a dramatic or descriptive hypothetical scene. This is kind of like a what-if scenario. We'll actually look at an example of that next week when we look at a sample student paper from a previous class. The student creates a sort of imagined scenario. Or you can begin with useful, insightful, or surprising facts. Thomas says something inflammatory or dissonant. Yeah, sure, although it probably fall into one of these categories. Like if it's something inflammatory or dissonant, it might be an example or an anecdote that's inflammatory or dissonant. But yeah, or something shocking, right? I said surprising down here. You seem to be kind of suggesting shocking. Let me just quickly say these are all awesome techniques, but they become awful techniques if you use them generically. Like if you're just dropping in a question out of nowhere that you don't care about answering yourself, or you don't want your readers to truly consider, then it's just a generic question that's beginning your essay. Or people love to run to quote sites and find just a convenient quote to drop in to begin a paper. Again, that's not really very useful. That's just you dropping in a quote out of nowhere. But if you can really use these the way they're intended to sort of open up the topic, to transition into your larger topic, then they can be awesome techniques. And I'll try to show an example of that with what I posted to the board. Although you might disagree that my example is awesome. But I tried to follow number one here, to begin with an example or anecdote. Actually, let's take a look at that real quickly. Okay, so here's the discussion board. Let's see if I can blow this up a little bit. Okay, so here I am pretending I'm a game design student. I'm not a game design student, but because we don't have a program in English here at Full Sail, I'm not going to use my background as an English teacher as an example. So, because I do play video games, I'll just pretend I'm a game design student. So, and I'm using, by the way, the same thesis we just looked at in the presentation, dealing with images of women in video games. That's the same topic that I'm using here. And here's the introduction I came up with. It reads, in March 2013, game development company Crystal Dynamics released Tomb Raider, a reboot of the long-standing popular video game series. There were significant changes to the game, shifting away from the block-pulling, block-pushing, puzzle-solving format that had changed little since the original Tomb Raider appeared in 1996. There were new controls and an emphasis on an open-world environment. But perhaps the biggest change came for the game's protagonist herself, Lara Croft. Gone were the short shorts and skimpy tops. Gone was Lara's unrealistic figure, small-waisted and big-chested. Instead, a new Lara appeared, one whose character's design was less an adolescent boy's comic book dream and more a realistic portrayal of how a real young woman might actually look. And then comes the same thesis you saw in the presentation, right? Though video game companies have made strides by presenting strong, non-sexualized images of women, the companies could do more. Gamers need to write to game publishers and game magazines to let their voices be heard. Okay? So you can agree or disagree on your own whether you like this introduction, don't like it, but I was trying to use the example technique, okay? I know my larger topic is about images of women in video games, so I wanted to use a concrete example. And I didn't even, I could have used an example of a horrible image from a video game to make my point, but I decided to use the example of Tomb Raider because there was an example of a franchise that had made a fortune on a really sort of kind of over-the-top caricature of female body image in video games, and had actually gone completely against that in the most recent game. So I thought that was an interesting way to talk about the topic, right? So basically I'm using an example to transition into the larger topic. And then you can read through the rest on your own. I've gone through the rest of the assignment sheet prompts, explaining why I chose the topic, who my specific audience is. In this case, it's gamers. It's not all people. It's not the coders who are writing the game. It's not the people who are drawing Lara Croft. Okay, I'm reaching out to gamers. And then I did ask questions for classmates in case I'm not truly a classmate of yours, but if you want to respond to those questions, you can do so. But the important thing here is you have a kind of model to operate from, and it's already posted to the discussion board, so I hope you find that useful. So that's what you're trying to do. Gerald says just to be 100% sure, the entire post needs, yes, the entire thing. Like, you answer those 4 questions, you will be at 250 words before you even know it. For a lot of you, you'll probably be close to 150 to 200 words just with your introduction paragraph. So yeah, the whole thing needs to be at least 250 words. That just makes it so that people who aren't putting in the strongest effort and they write 2 or 3 sentences for an introduction and ignore the other 3 prompts, they're not doing what's being asked of them. Finally, here's quiz question number 4. It's not related to the stuff I just went over. It's just identify specifically who you think your intended audience will be for your PSA. And I should add to that, I mean, name the audience, but also explain why. Like in my case, I mean, you'll be doing it anyway when you get to the discussion board, but I want you to think through it before you get to the discussion boards due Wednesday, before you start writing your introduction, before you start posting and sharing on the board. I sort of want to hear your ideas about these things before we get too far along, because really I want to have a clear sense of your topic and your audience before we get too deep into the class, because then when problems occur, that's when people start running back and saying, oh gosh, this topic just is awful, I realize that now, can I change? And it's like week 3 and it's a little bit late to change. So these things are really designed to help get you on the right path. I'm sorry for speaking so fast. I actually was panicking because 30 minutes had already gone by and I hadn't really gotten much past textbook issues. So if I race through introductions and audience and thesis a little bit too fast, I do apologize. Next time I'll slow down. I think I just spent too long on the first half that I started freaking out about the second half. Oops, I thought I had a slide that just said questions, but okay. Questions? Preguntas? Anything about the course as a whole, the textbook, due dates. I know there was a lot of, again, chaos, which I apologize for some small errors that appeared in the initial version that got posted on Monday of the class. I will say that I don't think it makes it entirely clear, but for this first discussion board thing, you should be posting your introduction paragraph before Wednesday. Like, in order to give other people time to respond to your introduction and your 4 points that you list there, it's not going to be incredibly helpful if you do so at 10 p.m. Wednesday night. Okay? And again, because I've extended the due date, it was originally supposed to be due on Sunday to Wednesday. Hopefully it gives you time to sort, especially now that I've modeled what you need to do. You know, give it people at least 24 hours to see your work. Daryl says, "What's the textbook again? I'm still a little bit lost." I think I accidentally closed it. Right, McGraw-Hill Connect. I'm not sure what you're confused about. The textbook is basically, I mean, once you register completely and you're in the section. Okay, so I'm going to click into our section. Again, this is the instructor view, but you see something that's pretty much identical to this. Your textbook is physically over here, engaging questions. It's just that we've already created specific readings that are found here to the left. So if you just click on week 1, for example, you have these things to read. They're technically taking you to the textbook that's over here. It just spares you the time of having to go in the textbook and actually find the reading. The readings are already, we've already gone in and highlighted specific readings for you to do. So, and other than that, you just have to keep up with these interactive writing, reading, and grammar activities, which are organized by week. That's an important thing too. Like the first one. Okay, so this one right here, week 1, Thesis and Persuasion. So you'll get a little bit reinforcement of the stuff that I talked about in this very session involving Thesis. It is due, let's see, what day did I make it due? Monday, okay? Again, this was something that's typically due on Saturday, but I've just nudged it to Monday. Eventually, the due dates get back on track towards the end of week 2, with stuff being due on either a Saturday or Sunday, but at least at the beginning, I've extended some of the due dates. Jeremy, I'm not sure if you want me to answer your question out loud, or it's a little bit difficult for me to do both. Nobody else knows what that means, by the way. Any other questions? Zachary says, should we wait for feedback from the 3rd and 4th quiz questions before writing a... I think you should. Like, you probably want to hear feedback from me. At the very least, you should message me with your ideas so I can respond. I mean, if you just have an awesome idea and you feel confident that I'm going to say yes to it, I guess it doesn't hurt to get things done early. But I'll try to grade those quizzes as quickly as I can. What day do I have the quiz due? Let's see, week 1 quiz is due on the 5th. So what's that, Friday? Yeah, so Friday the quiz is due. Even though I usually have weekends off, this is a little bit weird this month. So I'll definitely try to be grading them over the weekend. Okay, so that you'll have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to post to the discussion board. But yeah, I think in general you probably want to hear the instructor's feedback before you commit yourself. Good question though. Anything else? Or are we mostly good to go? I'm not trying to cut down questions, but I'm going to go ahead and answer. Jeremy sent me a private question, but I think it's not super private. I think I can answer it to everyone. In terms of appropriate email subjects, if you email me, most people use the FSO system. That's actually the preferred way, I think, to contact me, is you just click on the envelope icon up here and send me a message. I recommend that you follow pretty much standard, like, greet me as either Mr. Sussman or David. Have a body to your text, and then at least sign off with your name, even if there's not a closing like regards or thanks or best. But it shouldn't just be, hey, when is this due? Or, hey, when are you going to grade this? Okay, I mean, have some sort of tact. And if you send me a true email, I don't know, just do your best. Jeremy was asking about the proper subject heading. Just make sure that the subject is mostly appropriate. I know I'm supposed to follow full sale protocol, but I get tired of it. As long as the message itself is professional, as long as the subject is clear, I'm okay with that. Emma says, when are you posting the recording? It takes about an hour and a half to process, so I would say before 9 p.m. Eastern tonight, I'll send out the link as an announcement. So if you need to rewatch parts of the session, or if you just want to skip ahead, like you don't remember what the quiz question was, and you just want to skip to that part of the video to see the quiz question again, that's fine. Yeah, good questions, people. Oh, and by the way, I don't want to make people stay here. Daryl says no, it's both audio and video. I'm screen capturing right now, so you're going to see everything that you see now. But I was reminded that when you do need to, if you need to get an answer that you want me to respond to, do use the envelope icon, because the thing to the left here, the thing that looks like a bell, I get notifications every time a student even sneezes. So here, Brian Nichols submitted his professionalism, meaning he read over the professional stuff. Okay, I got a notification. Marvin posted something in community board. Hello, everyone. I got a notification. So everything you complete, I get a notification, which means if you go into a specific activity and leave me a comment, I do try to keep up with the comments, but sometimes it's easy to miss one. So if it's truly something you need an answer to, don't leave it as a comment under an activity. Okay, send me a message. I know it's a little bit confusing because you don't know that from your end as a student, but as an instructor, it's difficult when you're receiving dozens of notifications a day, and I miss a comment that truly needs to be answered because it's buried within all those notifications. Okay, anything else? Are people mostly okay? I'm concerned that it was too fast, but I hope most of it was understandable. Like, we got the gist of what a PSA is, what a good topic is versus a topic that's too broad or has no persuasive stance. Okay, if you're good, I mean, I'll hang out to answer questions, but if you're feeling confident, I'm not going to force you to stay here. You're allowed to go enjoy your evening. Okay, you're welcome. I'm going to stop the recording now, though I'll hang out for a little bit.